Hi, I'm Emma Radchik, and the following is just a short screencast which will document the content of my test plan created for the video game Pixel Wizard for my software testing module at GMIT. So here is just my cover page and the table of contents, which lists all the headings. Next is the introduction. The introduction just outlines the content of the test plan itself and gives a general overview of the game. So Pixel Wizard is a 2D side-scrolling platformer video game. The objectives explain the actual end goal of the test plan, and then the task list how exactly to reach that end goal, and then who is responsible for each task. So the business analyst, for example, will converse with the customer, the QA team will do alpha and beta testing, the software development team will do unit testing, and the test team will lead the majority of the testing effort. So, for example, the integration, the system tests, etc. And then the scope itself goes into further detail of the testing activities, which will be that are implemented in this test plan. For example, the unit testing, the integration testing, the system testing, for example. Then the testing strategy itself then further explains how we will go about each of these testing methodologies. So it begins with the unit testing, and it just begins with a short definition of what unit testing is, the types of coverage we wish to monitor in the unit tests, the entry criteria, which is what needs to be completed before the unit test is started, and the completion criteria, which is what needs to be documented to actually complete the unit tests and move on to integration testing. Here are some of the metrics that are, I guess, recommended to be used. So, for example, cyclomatic complexity measures the bit of paths to their code, and a value below 10 is advised to keep the code simple and so it doesn't need to be refactored. And then the techniques used to trace the requirements themselves. So a traceability matrix using an Excel sheet will be used, and that will just link each requirement to the test case and if it has passed or failed. So this just means to keep track of the tests. The participants is who will be doing the unit tests and their roles. The methodology is how the unit tests themselves will be carried out. In this case, JUnit will be used to develop and run the automated test cases. And this is just a short description of the tests. Next is integration and system testing. This, much like unit testing, here's a definition, the entry and completion criteria that are needed to move on to the next stage. Here is a short list of the integration tests that must be completed. For example, testing the health system modules, which will be tested using stubs to slowly lower the main character's health. And the methodologies and how the integration testing will be carried out. So I've decided to go with a bottom-up approach, as it is easier to find defects. And then a dummy driver program, in this case Rational Workbench 8.51 by IBM, will be used to conduct the integration tests. And then system testing, once again, explanation, it's just testing the entire system and its functionalities to make sure it meets the requirements. The completion and exit criteria for system testing. And here are the list of tests that will be carried out to ensure that the whole system is fully tested and works accordingly. So usability testing for user-friendliness, compatibility testing, so it works on various devices and different specs, recovery, how well it recovers from crashes, how well functionality, how well it meets the functional requirements, and uninstall and install is self-explanatory. Here's just a description of what has to work during the system tests. So it's just a quick outline. The participants, once again, is who's doing it and what their responsibilities are. Performance and stress testing, much again, the same. So what it is, entry and completion criteria, who's doing it, how it will be done. So LoadRunner by HP will be conducting these performance tests on the game itself. And I'll just be testing the amount of sprites that can be loaded in. So before the FPS or frames per second starts to deteriorate, or the lowest amount the FPS can go before the game is rendered unplayable. And then user acceptance testing is one of the final stages of testing. Once again, the definition, entry and completion. The participants, in this case, is also the end client itself. And then fitness will be used to just verify that the system meets its functional requirements. Next is compliance testing, once again, a quick definition, entry and completion, and compliance testing is just making sure the game itself meets all the legal and copyright requirements, so no laws are being broken. So this is done using the QA team conducts this. And then how they will do it, automation regression, once again, same thing. Definition, what is needed and what has to be finished before they can move on to the next stage. Who does it? So in this case, the QA team, and they will use the rational test, the rational function tester to automate the regression tests. Alpha beta testing, once again, this is just getting end user recommendations. So alpha testing will be done within the organization, while beta testing will be done outside, and then the QA team will create surveys and read these surveys from the outside beta testers to examine any functionalities that they might have missed while testing. And this is just entry, completion, and once again how it will be done, so the methodology, and they'll just gather the survey reports. Next is the environment. So this is the software that was used to conduct, or that will be used to conduct the testing of the game. Next is the recommended hardware to be used for the environment. So this is for the desktop, and then mobile we have the Androids and the list of required iPhones. Next is a test schedule, which is just the major milestones, so the prototype, the execution, and evaluation, and when they start and when they end. Next is problem reporting. This is just the steps that the team must carry out if they find a defect. So they must log it, its ID, then someone is assigned to it, and then they must fix it within their assigned schedule, and then everyone has to verify that is resolved. So, and then backlog is used for actually keeping track of all the bugs. Next, change requests. This is just the criteria that is needed to actually consider having a major change to the system. So, for example, if it takes 3 days to implement, if the stakeholders agree to the changes, if it will greatly improve the final the functionality, then the change will be considered. This is just to make sure that no major changes that really affect the schedule are made during the actual testing process itself, and if the changes are really necessary. Next is just the features. So this just quickly lists all the features of the game to be tested. So the main menu, everything that's the functionality of the main menu, the game mechanics, the background, the user interface, the player mechanics, the health system, the enemy, if the enemy dies, what happens, if the enemy loses health, what happens, the pause menu, everything that must be frozen in the pause menu, the player can move through scenes easily, things like that. And the not to be tested are interruptions. So if someone calls someone while playing the mobile game, or another app interrupts the user, that's not tested, date and time isn't tested, and security is not conducted in this test plan. Next is the resources and roles. So here is everyone who is a part of the team, and you can see there their role. This just lists the, it gives a further description of the role. So what the project manager must do, what the test lead must do, the testing team, etc. Next is schedules. These are deliverables, who must submit them and their due date, and this corresponds with the milestones as well. So, lost it there. There it is. So all that is synchronized. And then the risks and assumptions, these are the possible risks that may happen, and this just lists how likely they are to happen and how much it will impact the testing process, and how to mitigate these risks to have the least amount of damage possible. And finally is just the tools listed for testing, so version control, bug reporting, their name and their version. And that concludes my test plan, and yes, thank you.